Right now, there is a very good chance that you are trapped in wet concrete.
I mean, hopefully not literally trapped.
Right, yeah, hopefully not literally, but psychologically. You might be stuck deep in the mud, totally unable to turn left or turn right.
And the really strange part is that you probably don't even realize it.
Exactly, because you just call it your daily routine. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today we are taking a stack of advanced English linguistics. Specifically, we're looking at a fascinating transcript from a C2 advanced English listening practice session.
Which I gotta say is an incredible source material. It's so rich.
It really is. And our mission today is to extract what is essentially a hidden, almost terrifyingly accurate psychological map from it. We're not just reading a vocabulary list here.
No, definitely not. We are going to decode exactly why the language we use to talk about our personal habits, our daily routines and our massive life changes is so incredibly physical.
Yeah, physical. That's the key word. It is a complete shift in how we usually think about human behavior, right?
Totally. I mean, we tend to imagine our choices and our habits as these weightless, invisible things. Like a thought is just an electrical impulse. A decision is just a firing of neurons.
Right, it feels very abstract.
Exactly. But when you look at the historical idioms that native English speakers have developed over centuries, specifically to describe trying to change those invisible behaviors, suddenly you're dealing with immense physical weight.
It gets so heavy.
Yeah, you're dealing with heavy machinery, solid rock, and just the sheer mechanical friction of trying to move forward.
And that is exactly the journey we are going on today. We are tracing the complete life cycle of human change. We're going to start with the cozy biological comforts of our morning routines and then push through the agonizing physical resistance of trying to alter our behavior.
And hopefully we make it all the way to the ultimate reward of a total fresh start.
Right. So I want you to think about your own life right now as you're listening. You have good habits, and you definitely have habits that are holding you back. Have you ever wondered why simply deciding to act differently feels like you're trying to physically break out of a prison?
Well, it feels that way because linguistically and neurologically, you kind of are.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, changing who we are or even just slightly altering a deeply ingrained daily pattern, it's never a passive experience. It's a collision between your conscious desires and your brain's deeply entrenched survival mechanisms.
And our language reflects that collision perfectly.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into the baseline of that survival mechanism, the place where it all starts.
It's a comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. Because long before a habit becomes a prison, it starts off as something incredibly soothing, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The starting point for all human behavior is this deep biological desire for predictability. We start as what the text calls a creature of habit.
And I always found that exact phrase so interesting. We don't say a person of habit, we say creature. It's like it strips away our high-level, complex humanity and just reduces us to pure biology.
Which, honestly, is incredibly accurate from a neurological standpoint.
Is it?
Yeah, totally. When we talk about a creature of habit, we are talking about someone who finds profound comfort in a strict, predictable routine. They actively dislike surprises. They want their environment completely controlled.
Like the classic example from the source material.
Yes, the grandfather who has sat down and drank his cup of tea at exactly 4 p.m. every single day for 40 years.
40 years.
Right. Or, the person who goes to the same deli and orders the exact same turkey sandwich for lunch every single Tuesday.
I feel like society sometimes mocks that person, though. Like, we celebrate spontaneity.
Yeah.
The people who backpack through Europe on a whim. But honestly, there is something kind of beautiful about that 4 p.m. tea.
Oh, there's immense psychological value in it. Think about what that 4 p.m. tea actually represents to the human brain. The world outside is totally chaotic. Economies crash, relationships end, the weather is unpredictable. But for 40 years, no matter what is happening globally or personally, at exactly 4 p.m., the kettle boils. The water pours. The tea steeps.
It's a psychological anchor.
Exactly. And your brain loves it because it requires zero cognitive load. The basal ganglia, which is the part of the brain responsible for automated behaviors, it just takes over. You don't have to spend any precious mental energy deciding what to do at 4 p.m.
So the brain is essentially going into like power saving mode.
Yeah.
And it rewards us with a feeling of comfort for doing so.
Precisely.
But here is the problem. And I'm sure you listening have experienced this in your own life. At a certain point, that comforting predictability kind of calcifies. It crosses a very invisible line.
It does.
So at what point does that daily turkey sandwich or that afternoon tea stop being a comforting anchor and start becoming a chain that holds you back? When does it become a prison?
Well, the shift happens when predictability stops being a preference and becomes a mandate. That's the next stage of the behavioral life cycle we see in the text. It's when you transition from being a creature of habit to being set in your ways.
Set in your ways? I mean, even just saying it, the words feel heavier.
Because the underlying metaphor is physically heavy. Think about the chemistry of wet concrete.
Okay, concrete.
Yeah. When concrete is first poured onto a sidewalk or into a foundation, it's entirely fluid. It's highly adaptable. You can shape it with a trowel. You can smooth it out. You can leave your handprints or footprints in it. It responds to its environment.
Right, which represents our behavior when we're young or when we're first learning a new skill. We're adaptable.
Exactly. We're fluid. But concrete isn't designed to stay wet.
No, definitely not.
Through a chemical reaction, it dries, it cures, and it sets. It becomes solid, immovable rock. Yeah. Once behavioral concrete is set, the fluidity is entirely gone. A person who is set in their ways has done things the same way for so long that they have become completely inflexible. They stubbornly refuse to adapt to new information, new technologies, or, new perspectives.
We all know someone exactly like this.
Yeah.
The immediate example that comes to mind is that boss who absolutely refuses to transition to a cloud-based software system.
Oh, yes.
And they insist on printing out every single email to put in physical manila folders.
It's maddening. Or the relative who flat out refuses to learn how to use a smartphone, even though it means they miss out on the family group chats and all the photos.
Right. And if you look closely at those situations, you realize the underlying emotion has changed. It's no longer about the warm comfort of a cup of tea.
Not at all.
It's about an active, sometimes hostile, stubborn resistance to the world moving forward. I mean, printing out an email isn't comforting. It's highly inefficient. It causes printer jams, and it frustrates the entire office.
But for that boss, their behavioral concrete has dried. It has set.
So how do you change them? You can't just mold solid rock with your bare hand.
You can't. And that is the terrifying reality of being set in your ways. Once the concrete is dry, minor adjustments are just impossible. To change that behavior, you don't just need a gentle conversation. You literally need a psychological jackhammer.
A jackhammer.
Yeah, it requires a massive, disruptive, often painful amount of force to break apart the old routine before you can even begin to pour new, fluid concrete.
That sounds exhausting. And frankly, it's probably why most of us avoid changing our deepest flaws.
It's just too much work.
But before our habits completely harden into a solid slab of concrete, they usually start as something a little softer. They start as tracks in the dirt or mud. Which brings us perfectly to our next theme, and honestly one of the most fascinating linguistic quirks I have ever come across.
The wagon metaphors?
Yes, the wagon metaphors. It's this whole cluster of fascinating historical idioms centered around heavy horse-drawn wagons.
It is truly remarkable how much of our modern psychological vocabulary comes directly from 18th and 19th century transportation.
It's so weird. Right. But it groups together perfectly to explore the friction of change. Let's start with the feeling of your routine turning to a trap. Let's look at what it actually means to be stuck in a rut.
So to really feel the weight of this phrase, we have to mentally travel back a few hundred years. Long before asphalt, paved highways, or even cobblestone streets in rural areas.
Just dirt.
Just dirt. Imagine a dirt road connecting two towns. Now imagine a massive horse-drawn wagon carrying tons of supplies, lumber, iron, grain.
And crucially, these aren't modern rubber tires. These are massive, rigid, incredibly heavy wooden wheels banded with iron.
Exactly. Now imagine it has been raining for a few days. That dirt road turns to thick mud. As those heavy, iron-banded wooden wheels roll over the wet dirt, they compress the ground. They dig deep, narrow U-shaped channels into the road.
And those physical channels carved into the mud are literally called ruts.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack the physics of this for a second. Let's say you are driving a wagon the next day, and your heavy wooden wheel drops down into a rut that is, say, 10 inches deep. What happens to your ability to drive?
You lose your agency. You completely lose the ability to steer the vehicle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If the wheel is wedged tight inside that deep, muddy groove, the horse cannot turn the wagon to the left to seek a new path. It cannot turn to the right to avoid a puddle. The wagon is physically trapped by the groove created by all the heavy trips that came before it.
So it can only move straight ahead.
Right. It's locked into the exact same path.
And when you map that historical mechanical reality onto human psychology, the accuracy is just devastating.
Yeah.
Idiomatically, being stuck in a rut means your life, your career, or maybe a relationship has become completely stagnant.
You feel like you have totally lost your ability to steer your own life.
Right.
It perfectly articulates that feeling of passive forward motion. You are moving, but you aren't choosing the direction.
Think about someone who has worked the exact same mid-level corporate job for 6 years. They haven't been promoted. They haven't learned a single new skill. Every day is basically identical to the last. They wake up, they commute, they process the paperwork, they commute home.
They are rolling forward, but only because the channel is already carved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They want to change directions. They tell their friends they want to pivot careers, maybe go back to school or start a creative business. But the psychological wheels of their daily routine are sunk so deep into that groove that turning left or right feels mechanically impossible. So they just wake up the next day and keep rolling straight.
And just like a real wagon, escaping that rut requires a tremendous violent jolt. The horse has to violently heave the wagon up and over the ridge of dried mud, which takes exponentially more energy than just continuing to roll forward in the comfortable groove.
And most people simply don't want to expend that massive burst of energy.
No, they don't, so they stay in the rut.
So that's the friction of stagnation. You're trapped by your own past momentum.
Ah.
But there's another wagon metaphor that deals with a completely different kind of friction. The friction of forced movement.
Ah, yes.
Let's talk about what happens when you jump on the bandwagon.
This one is so much fun because it takes us out of the muddy countryside and drops us right into the chaotic, noisy streets of 19th century political campaigns.
I have to admit, for a long time, I pictured a literal wooden wagon just packed full of people playing trombones and drums like a parade float.
Well, you actually aren't far off at all.
Really?
Yeah. During historical political campaigns, politicians obviously didn't have television ads or, social media to drum up support, so they had to create a physical spectacle.
Make some noise.
Exactly. They would rent a massive wagon, hire a live musical band, usually a brass band, and have them ride through the center of town playing incredibly loud, festive music. The politician would literally stand right there on the wagon, giving speeches over the music.
Okay, so it was a literal bandwagon, a wagon with a band on it.
Yes. It was designed to draw a huge crowd. Now, here is where the human behavior element comes in. If that particular politician started gaining momentum, if the crowd seemed really energized and the music was infectious, people in the town who wanted to associate themselves with the winning side would physically run up and jump onto the moving wagon.
Wait, literally jump on it.
Literally jump on the wagon. They wanted to be physically seen riding with the popular crowd.
They weren't driving. They didn't build the wagon. They probably didn't even read the politician's policies. They just heard loud music and saw a crowd, and their primate brain said, I need to be up there.
That is the absolute essence of it. And today, when we talk about our behavior, jumping on the bandwagon means adopting a new habit, following a trend, or supporting a cause simply because it has suddenly become popular.
It's the absolute absence of deep personal conviction.
It is pure passive conformity.
Right. It's the guy who suddenly declares he is adopting a strict vegan diet, not because he cares about animal welfare or research the nutrition, but because his 3 favorite celebrities are doing it. Or the person who dumps half their savings into a highly volatile cryptocurrency because they saw people bragging about it online without having the faintest idea how it actually works.
It is the illusion of personal change. You feel like you are moving forward because the wagon is moving and the music is loud and everyone around you is cheering, but you aren't actually driving your own life.
You're just a passenger on someone else's temporary trend.
Exactly. And the defining characteristic of a bandwagon is that as soon as the music stops or the wagon hits a bump, everyone jumps off just as quickly as they jumped on.
Which perfectly transitions us to the final, and I think the most tragic, of the wagon metaphors. What happens when you don't just step off the wagon, but you violently fail to stay on it? Let's look at falling off the wagon.
This one has a much heavier historical origin. We shift from the noisy political campaigns of the 1800s to the intense, socially charged atmosphere of the 19th century temperance movement.
Right, the massive social movement attempting to ban the consumption of alcohol across the country.
Yes. During this era, sanitation wasn't exactly what it is today. In many places, finding safe, clean drinking water was actually really difficult, which is one major reason people drank so much ale and cider.
That makes sense.
So, to combat this and promote sobriety, temperance advocates would literally drive large, horse-drawn wagons filled with massive vats of clean, fresh drinking water right through the streets of towns.
So they were offering a physical alternative to the tavern.
Precisely. And if a person made a solemn vow to stop drinking alcohol and remain sober, the phrase they used to declare their new lifestyle was that they were on the water wagon.
Ah.
They had chosen the vehicle of purity over the vehicle of intoxication.
So to fall off the wagon wasn't just a quirky little phrase. It meant something incredibly serious and devastating. It meant a person had suffered a relapse, they had broken their vow of sobriety, succumbed to their addiction, and gone back to drinking.
It was a catastrophic failure of a life-altering habit. But, over the last century, the phrase has broadened out significantly.
Right.
Today, it applies to the failure to maintain absolutely any new habit, diet, discipline, or resolution. It has become our universal idiom for the collapse of self-improvement.
Think about the pure psychological agony of this. You decide to quit consuming processed sugar. You clean out your pantry. You meal prep. You are doing incredibly well for 3 weeks. You are sitting high up on the wagon.
You're feeling great.
Feeling amazing. But then you go to a friend's birthday party. You're tired, you're stressed from work, and someone puts a massive slice of rich chocolate cake right in front of you. You cave. You eat the massive piece of cake. You fell off the wagon.
Or consider the person who commits to a rigorous 5 a.m. gym routine. They do it perfectly from Monday to Thursday. But Friday night, they stay out late, and Saturday morning, the alarm goes off, and they just shut it off and sleep for 2 days straight. They entirely abandoned the fitness plan. They fell off the wagon.
It perfectly captures that sharp, sudden, sickening drop. You were elevated. You were moving forward on this difficult vehicle of self-mastery.
Yeah.
And then gravity and human weakness took over, and suddenly you're just lying back in the dirt, watching the wagon roll away without you.
It is a profound feeling of defeat.
I want to pause here for a second and point out a massive historical irony that jumped out at me while looking at this language. And listener, think about this. Think about what a wagon fundamentally is.
Okay.
From an engineering standpoint, a wagon is a piece of technology invented for one specific purpose, forward transportation. It was designed to haul humanity and our resources into the future, to help us progress.
Right.
Yet almost all of our enduring idioms about wagons are used to describe the exact opposite of progress.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We use this vehicle of forward motion to describe being helplessly trapped in the mud, being a mindless follower of a crowd, or suffering a humiliating relapse and completely failing our goals.
It is an incredible paradox. The very machine we built to drive us forward has linguistically become the primary symbol of our stagnation and our failure.
I think it just highlights how incredibly painfully difficult the friction of personal change really is. We invent a machine to conquer distance, and we end up using its vocabulary to describe how utterly stuck we are inside our own minds.
But the human spirit rarely accepts being stuck permanently.
Thank goodness.
When we realize we are trapped in that rut, or we're lying in the dirt after falling off the wagon, the immediate, almost desperate psychological reflex is to try and erase the failure. We look for a way to restart.
Which brings us to the mechanics of erasure. Let's look at how we attempt to reset our reality. I want to contrast 3 specific phrases from the text that deal with starting over. Turn over a new leaf, wipe the slate clean, and back to square one. Before we get into the history, I find it fascinating that these 3 phrases all deal with the exact same desire, erasing a mistake, but they carry completely different emotional weights.
They absolutely do. Let's start with the most optimistic of the 3. Turn over a new leaf.
Okay, I have a confession to make here. For my entire life, up until reading the research for this deep dive, I thought this phrase was about a tree.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I pictured autumn, the dead leaves falling off the branches, and then spring arriving with fresh, new green leaves, shedding the dead weight of the past.
It's a beautifully poetic image, and honestly, the vast majority of people assume the exact same thing. But the actual origin takes us away from nature entirely and drops us into a 16th century bookbinder shop.
A bookbinder shop.
Yeah. The leaves in this context have absolutely nothing to do with trees. They are the pages of a book.
The pages of a book were called leaves.
Yes. And in the 1500s, paper and vellum were incredibly expensive commodities. Books were highly valuable, handcrafted objects. So if you were a merchant keeping financial records, or a scholar writing a manuscript and your quill pen leaked, or you made a massive, illegible mistake on the page.
You couldn't just hit a backspace key.
Exactly. And you couldn't even rip the page out because the book was totally bound and the paper was just too precious to waste.
So the page was completely ruined with messy ink. So what did you do?
You had to physically take that ruined, messy leaf of paper, turn it over, and reveal the fresh, clean, completely blank backside of the page to start your writing over from scratch.
Oh, the tactile satisfaction of that must have been immense.
It is the ultimate gesture of leaving a mess behind, which is why, idiomatically, it has become the quintessential New Year's resolution phrase. It encapsulates the deeply human hope that the messy past can simply be turned over and hidden away.
Think about someone who has been chronically disorganized for years. Their apartment is a mess, their finances are chaotic, their relationships are strained. Their life looks exactly like a page covered in spilled, chaotic ink.
Right.
When they finally reach their breaking point, they don't try to go back and erase the ink. They decide to turn over a new leaf. They buy a brand new, pristine daily planner. They hire a life coach. They start a brand new morning routine.
They are actively deciding that the past is written, it is messy, but the future is a completely blank page waiting to be written correctly. It's an act of immense optimism.
And it shares that exact DNA of hopefulness with the next phrase, wipe the slate clean. But this one takes us out of the 16th century manuscript room and puts us into a bustling Victorian schoolhouse.
Yes, this takes us to an era before cheap paper notebooks were mass-produced and handed out to every student. School children were issued small personal chalkboards framed in wood called slates.
Right.
They would do their mathematical calculations or practice their spelling using a small piece of chalk.
And children who are just learning to multiply or spell are naturally going to make an enormous amount of mistakes. The slate is going to be covered in errors.
But the genius of the slate is its impermanence. The mistakes aren't locked in ink. When a student messed up an entire long division problem, they simply took a wet cloth or a sponge, wiped the chalk dust away, and instantly the slate was dark, clean, and ready for a brand new attempt. The error was physically gone.
When we map that onto modern relationships, it becomes incredibly powerful. Idiomatically, wiping the slate clean is about the profound act of forgiving past mistakes. Imagine two business partners, or maybe two lifelong friends, who have just had a catastrophic, deeply hurtful argument.
They've said terrible things to each other.
Exactly. They could choose to hold on to that anger, keeping a meticulous record of every insult like ink on a page.
But if they want the relationship to survive, they have to agree to wipe the slate clean. They make a conscious, mutual decision to erase the messy chalk dust of the argument from their shared history. They don't bring it up again. They start the friendship over from a place of zero resentment.
It's an act of relational grace.
It really is.
It's a beautiful concept. But then we hit the third phrase in our mechanics of erasure, back to square one. And suddenly all that warmth, hope, and grace completely evaporates.
Yes, the emotional temperature drops drastically here. We move away from the classroom and look at the mechanics of traditional board games.
Think about playing a classic game like Snakes and Ladders or Monopoly. You roll the dice, you move your piece across the board, you're making measurable progress, you're navigating the obstacles, and you're getting closer to the finish line. You feel good.
But then you roll the wrong number. You land on a severe penalty space, or you draw a catastrophic card. And the rigid rules of the game dictate a harsh, non-negotiable punishment.
You have to physically pick up your piece and return it to the very first square on the board. You lose hours of progress in a single second. It is infuriating.
And that infuriating feeling maps perfectly onto the devastating experience of a failed effort in real life. When you are sent back to square one, it means all your hard work has been entirely erased by a failure.
The example of a diet fits perfectly here. You spend 6 months intensely dieting and exercising, you lose 20 pounds, you feel great, but then you get injured, you stop working out, the diet slips, and a year later you step on the scale, and you're at the exact same weight you started at. You are back to square one.
It's heartbreaking. Or think about the engineering world. A team of engineers spends 3 years and millions of dollars developing a prototype for a revolutionary new engine. They finally put it on the test stand, they fire it up, and it explodes into a million pieces.
The prototype is gone. The data is useless. They're literally back to square one. They have to start the design process over from a blank whiteboard. Now, wait. I'm going to point out a crucial psychological distinction here for you listening. Notice the difference in personal agency between these three phrases.
How do you mean?
Well, think about turning a leaf and wiping a slate. Those are voluntary, active choices. You choose to turn the page of your life. The two friends actively choose to wipe their relational slate clean. They are optimistic actions of self-forgiveness and improvement where you are in the driver's seat.
Ah, I see the contrast.
But going back to square one is a forced restart. You didn't eagerly choose to go back to the first square on the board. You didn't choose to have your engine explode. The rules of reality forced you back to the beginning because you failed. Turning a leaf is a fresh start. Going back to square one is a punishment.
That is a critical distinction. It proves that starting over is not a monolith. A fresh start can feel incredibly empowering if you author the change, or it can feel deeply defeating if it is violently thrust upon you by failure.
And that leads to the biggest question of all. Why do we fail so often? Why do the engines of our personal habits keep exploding and sending us back to the start?
That brings us to the core battleground of human behavior, the originality struggle.
Right. This is where we look at the ultimate war between our desire to be totally unique and the sheer chemical power of our own brains.
To understand this war, we have to look at two phrases that sit in direct, almost violent opposition to each other in the text. On one side, representing the absolute peak of human change, we have the phrase, break the mold.
To break the mold. Again, my brain always goes to smashing a literal clay vase, but the origin is industrial, isn't it?
It is heavily industrial. Think about the era of mass production, a factory producing thousands of identical metal gears or plastic toys or glass bottles. To achieve that kind of rapid uniformity, you use a mold, heavy, sturdy container made of iron or steel. You pour molten metal or hot liquid plastic into this container. It cools, you open it up, and you have your object.
And because that iron container is perfectly rigid, every single object that comes out of it is an exact, flawless clone of the last one. It guarantees total uniformity.
Precisely. So, from a manufacturing standpoint, what does it mean to literally break the mold? It means you are taking a sledgehammer and violently destroying the iron pattern itself. You are making it physically impossible to ever create that identical object again.
You are forcing an end to the repetition.
Yeah.
And idiomatically, breaking the mold means doing something completely different from what has ever been done before. You are refusing to be a clone. You are being radically disruptively original.
And society absolutely loves this. It's used as the highest possible compliment in the professional and creative worlds.
Right. If a brilliant architect designs a museum that looks like a floating spaceship rather than a standard square building, the critics will laud her and say she completely broke the mold of modern architecture. Or think about the tech industry. When a tech company doesn't just design another boring rectangular smartphone, but creates a device that completely shifts how we interact with technology, the press declares that they broke the mold. We throw awards at these people. We give them billions of dollars. We idolize originality.
We do, but there is a massive biological catch.
The counterweight. The humbling reality of the English proverb. Old habits die hard.
This proverb is the reality check against the fantasy of breaking the mold. Old habits die hard is an ancient recognition of the stubborn, unyielding reality of human brain chemistry and neuroplasticity.
It's the biological truth that behaviors you've practiced for a long time don't just sit lightly on the surface of your mind. They carve deep neural pathways. They become physically wired into your brain. And they are incredibly difficult to stop because your brain automatically wants to go back to the comfortable routine.
It loops all the way back to our very first concept, the creature of habit. Your brain is essentially an energy conservation machine. When it performs a known habit, it uses very little glucose and oxygen. It's efficient.
Right.
When you try to break a habit and do something new, the brain has to fire up the prefrontal cortex. It requires a massive spike in metabolic energy. The brain hates this. It feels like a threat. So it fights you. It screams at you to go back to the comfortable, low-energy routine. It does not want the old habit to die.
And we experience this biological resistance in the most mundane, frustrating ways. Think about updating a computer password. Your company forces you to change your password every 90 days. You know what the new password is. You wrote it down. But for the next 3 weeks, every time you sit down at your keyboard, your fingers automatically type the old password.
Yep.
You watch yourself doing it, and you can't stop it.
Yeah.
The habit dies incredibly hard.
Because your fingers have developed muscle memory that entirely bypasses your conscious thought. Your conscious mind wants to type a new password, but your basal ganglia says, no, we do it the old way, it's faster.
So listener, I want you to connect the dots here. Look at the bizarre paradox we live in. Why is it that society universally praises corporations, tech billionaires, and avant-garde artists for breaking the mold? But on a personal daily level, You and I constantly struggle to change our diet or stop biting our nails because old habits die hard.
It reveals a profound truth about where the real difficulty in life lies.
Exactly. It shows that it is infinitely harder to redesign our own minds than it is to redesign a skyscraper or a smartphone. A factory mold is an external piece of metal. You can smash it with a hammer in 5 seconds.
Right.
But you cannot take a hammer to the neural pathways inside your own skull. You can't violently smash an old habit. You have to slowly, painfully, exhaustingly rewire your brain day after day while your own biology fights you every step of the way, desperately screaming for its 4 p.m. cup of tea.
The mold we are trying to break is internal, and it is fiercely protected by our own survival instincts.
But let's say you do it. Let's say you endure the friction. You climb out of the muddy rut. You refuse to jump on the bandwagon. You turn over the messy leaf, and you slowly, painfully rewire the circuitry of your mind to break your own behavioral mold. What is waiting for you on the other side?
The ultimate reward. The final destination on this linguistic map of human change. And it's described by a phrase that is incredibly uplifting. A new lease on life.
A new lease on life. It sounds so poetic and spiritual, but when you actually break down the literal words, it is deeply bureaucratic. It's about signing legal paperwork.
It is entirely legal. A lease is a rental contract. Historically and today, it is the legally binding agreement that dictates how long you are allowed to stay in your home, your apartment, or your piece of farmland. It is a document with a strict expiration date.
So what did getting a new lease actually mean to the people who coined the phrase?
It wasn't just a metaphor for feeling good. In the 18th and 19th centuries, if your lease expired and the landlord refused to renew it, you lost your home. You lost your livelihood if you farmed the land. You could literally end up on the street. It was a terrifying existential threat.
That's terrifying.
So when the landlord finally brought out the paperwork and granted you a new lease, it meant you survived. You secured your future. You were safe from eviction. You got to stay in your home and start a brand new chapter with renewed security.
The relief must have been physical. It was literal salvation. So how did we map that historical legal panic onto our modern emotional state?
Idiomatically, translating that legal relief into psychology, a new lease on life describes a profound internal resurrection. It means an event has occurred that has completely renewed your sense of energy. The expiration date on your happiness has been canceled. You suddenly have immense enthusiasm for the future. You are flooded with optimism.
It's the absolute opposite of being stuck in a rut. You feel like a completely new person operating on a totally new timeline.
And it often applies to deeply physical transformations as well. The classic example is a massive health scare. Someone is diagnosed with a severe illness. Their body is failing them. Their biological lease on their life feels like it is rapidly expiring.
Right.
But then they undergo a dangerous surgery.
The surgery is a success. They spend months in agonizing rehab. But eventually they wake up one morning and the pain is gone. The disease is gone. Surviving that trauma gives them a literal new lease on life. They appreciate the taste of their food more. They appreciate the sunlight more because they know how close they came to the expiration date.
Another common example is escaping a deeply toxic environment. Think of the person who spent 10 years grinding away in a highly stressful, abusive corporate job. They were completely set in their ways, terrified to leave. But finally, the pain of staying becomes greater than the fear of leaving. They quit, they pack up their life, and they move out to a quiet town in the countryside to do something simpler.
The massive reduction in cortisol, the change in environment, it grants them a new lease on life. They are no longer just surviving, they are actually living.
It is the ultimate reward for enduring the friction of change. It's the sunrise after the long, dark night of being stuck.
So, listener, think about the incredible trajectory we have just mapped out together. Think about your own life journey as we recap this. We all start at that comfortable but potentially dangerous baseline of being a creature of habit, drinking our tea at the same time every day.
And we examine the terrifying danger of letting that fluid comfort harden into wet concrete until you are totally set in your ways, requiring a jackhammer to change your mind.
We felt the agonizing mechanical friction of being trapped in the deep, muddy ruts of a stagnant job or a dead relationship, completely unable to turn the heavy wooden wheel of your life to the left or right.
We navigated the social pressure to just jump onto a noisy bandwagon to avoid thinking for ourselves, and we faced the harsh, humiliating reality of falling off the water wagon when our willpower completely collapses.
We struggled with the messy, ruined ink of our past, trying to figure out how to cleanly turn over a 16th century page or wipe a dusty schoolhouse slate clean, while desperately trying to avoid rolling the wrong dice and being forced back to square one.
And we recognize the brutal internal war between our desire to violently break the industrial mold of our lives and the biological fact that our neural pathways ensure old habits die incredibly hard.
But finally, after pushing through all of that mud and chalk and iron and concrete, we reach the end. We earn that new rental contract, we get a new lease on life, and we become a lighter, energized, better version of ourselves.
When you look at it from a high level, it is truly staggering how expressive and deeply introspective these idioms are. Generations of English speakers, from medieval bookkeepers to Victorian schoolchildren to 19th century wagon drivers, have unwittingly handed us the exact precise vocabulary we need to articulate the agonizing, beautiful psychological journey of human change.
It really is a map. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought, something to mull over on your drive or your walk today. Let's look at the actual physical materials embedded in the metaphors we just unpacked.
Oh, that's interesting.
When you look at the idioms for being stuck, for failing, and for being trapped in a life you hate, what are the materials made of? They are defined by massive density, solid rock concrete, deep, thick, suffocating mud ruts, heavy, crushing, iron-banded wooden wagon wheels, heavy iron factory molds.
Yeah, it's true.
But then look at the idioms for successfully changing your life. What materials did they rely on? They rely on incredibly light, fragile, almost weightless things.
Yeah.
A single paper-thin leaf of a book. A wet piece of cloth wiping a slate.
Yeah.
A flimsy piece of paper with a rental contract written on it.
Wow.
I think language is trying to tell us a secret here. The collective wisdom of humanity is trying to tell you that getting stuck in life feels like a heavy, physical, inescapable trap. But changing your life, breaking out of the concrete, and rewriting your entire future, that isn't a physical barrier at all. It is entirely a state of mind. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the hidden language of change. Keep examining the words you use. Don't let yourself get stuck in a rut. And remember, no matter how messy the ink is on the page of your life right now, it is never, ever too late to turn over a new leaf. Take care.